Today's webinar is titled The EMS Flipped Classroom, Utilizing the Flipped Classroom Method for EMS Programs, presented by Sherry Kinnucan, Director of Education at Platinum Educational Group. I'm going to pass it over now to our presenter. Sherry, thank you so much for being here with us today to share your knowledge and experience with us, and we look forward to the presentation.
Thank you, Rio. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then minimize Zoom, and then I'll start my slideshow. So as Rio said, my name is Sherry Kinnucan. I'm a paramedic by trade and licensed as a paramedic and EMS instructor coordinator in the state of Michigan, and went on to continue my education in higher education leadership. Today we're going to talk about utilizing the flipped classroom in our EMS classrooms. So as Rio mentioned, I am the Director of Education for Platinum Educational Group, so any references to Platinum products is simply for informational purposes. So today we are going to talk in depth about how people learn, understand what the flipped classroom is, and identify the roles within that environment, and then review some of the pros and cons of student-directed learning, and hopefully help prepare you to integrate active learning into the EMS classroom. So I've compiled some resources at the end of this presentation that can help you to do that. We often hear the terms flipped classroom, student-centered learning, learner-centered learning, or self-directed learning. Regardless of the terminology used, all of these define an approach to education where students or learners take an active role in their own learning process. So it involves shifting the focus from the teacher as the sole source of knowledge to students as active participants and co-creators of that knowledge. We'll talk more about the pros and cons of student-directed learning later, but I would like to highlight several of the advantages of student-directed learning in the classroom, including increased engagement, personalized learning, development of critical thinking skills, autonomy, self-regulation, collaboration and communication skills, and long-term retention of knowledge and preparation for lifelong learning. Because as we all know, learning won't stop once these students leave our classrooms. The basis for instructional design lies in theory, which was a lot of my graduate education. And that is why I'd like to go into a little bit of depth about the foundational research of teaching and learning, because if we can better understand how our learners learn, it provides the insight as to how we as instructors should teach them. So learning theories describe how students receive, process, and retain knowledge during the learning process. So there's several educational learning theories, behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism. There's also learning style theories, which dive more into the domains of learning. And then there's additional framework like Bloom's taxonomy, which provides structure for student learning objectives. So we won't talk about all of these, but I do want to touch on a few that highlight our topic today of active learning in the classroom. In the Professor's Guide to Using Bloom Taxonomy by Topat, they state, and I quote, "Bloom's taxonomy is arguably the most influential work in American education," which is why I'd like to spend a little bit of time going over this framework and its evolution over time. I'm particularly grateful that Bloom's taxonomy was taught to me early in my EMS instructor education. However, not all educators are even aware of this framework. Bloom's taxonomy helps to provide a sense of structure to the way we learn, to the way our students learn. And if we can understand how we learn, we can become better educators overall. A little background on the original Bloom's taxonomy. So this was created in 1956. Benjamin Bloom with collaborators Max Engelhardt, Edward First, Walter Hill, and David Crothwell, which you'll hear that name again later. They published a framework for categorizing educational goals, and it was titled Taxonomy of Educational Objectives, or more commonly known as Bloom's Taxonomy. The levels of Bloom's taxonomy are often represented as a pyramid, like you see here, with knowledge at the base and evaluation at the top. And it's used as a guide to instructional design and assessment. It aims to promote higher order thinking skills and deeper understanding. So the framework categorizes cognitive skills from the lower order thinking skills at the bottom to the higher order thinking skills. Each of the categories contains subcategories ranging from simple to complex and concrete to abstract, but it is most commonly remembered according to the 6 main categories of knowledge through evaluation. In ascending order of complexity, we have knowledge, comprehension, application, then analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So knowledge, that involves recalling or recognizing facts, information, or concepts. It would include remembering specific details or terms, definitions, basic concepts. Following knowledge, the categories were presented as skills and abilities. In the skills and abilities, we have comprehension, which refers to the understanding of information, the student's ability to interpret or explain it in their own words. It involves grasping meaning of ideas, summarizing information, making connections between different concepts. And then we have application. This is the student's ability to apply learned knowledge or concepts in different contexts or situations. So it involves using acquired knowledge to solve problems, analyze situations, make connections to real-world scenarios. Then we move on to analysis. So this is where they can break down the information into its constituent parts and examine the relationships between them. So this would include identifying patterns, organizing information, and recognizing underlying structures and principles. Then we're moving up to the synthesis level. This is where the student now has the ability to create something new, so by combining the different elements or ideas that they've learned. So this involves generating hypotheses, designing experiments, composing original works, or creating solutions to problems. Evaluation is the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy. It involves making judgments or assessments based on criteria or standards. So this would include evaluating the validity of arguments, critiquing others, or making informed decisions based on evidence. The first volume of the taxonomy was titled Handbook 1 Cognitive. So that was in 1956. And then in 1964, the second volume titled Handbook 2 Affective was published by Crothwell, Bloom, and Macia. Although still referred to Bloom's taxonomy, you might also recognize this as Crothwell's affective domain or Crothwell's taxonomy. And in this pyramid, in ascending order of complexity, we start with receiving, which refers to creating awareness of feelings and emotions. The student is electing to listen and pay attention, and they're willing to listen to the instructor. Followed by responding. This refers to the active participation of the student. They're a willing participant in the classroom. Next, we have valuing, and this refers to seeing the worth in something, expressing it through ideas and behavior. They're motivated to participate and want to express that through their behavior. And then we have organizing. This is where the student starts to bring together their values and begins building an internally consistent value system. So they're prioritizing those values. And then we have characterizing. So this is where the student will demonstrate consistent characteristic behavior by internalizing their values, and it lets them control their behavior. It starts to become their character. Then in the 1970s, so there were several recommended additions to Bloom's original taxonomy that elaborate on the psychomotor domain. So there are several reference psychomotor domains, including Dave's taxonomy in 1970, Simpson's taxonomy in 1972, and Harrow's taxonomy in 1972. Of these, excuse me, the most commonly referenced is Dave's psychomotor domain, which includes, from the bottom of this pyramid up, imitation. This is where the learner attempts to repeat an observed skill, followed by manipulation. This is where the student has the ability to perform the task either by memory or by following instructions. And then we have precision, where the student's able to perform the task proficiently and without intervention, followed by articulation. Articulation is the ability to modify the skill to fit new situations. And then we have naturalization. This is where the student's ability to perform the task is natural. They don't need to think about it. It becomes second nature at that point. Then in 2001, a revision to Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives was published, and it was titled A Taxonomy for Teaching, Learning, and Assessment. Bloom's taxonomy.net accurately describes that the new title draws attention away from the more static notion of educational objectives in Bloom's original title, and points to a more dynamic concept of classification. Supporting that description is the use of verbs to label the categories. So these actions describe the cognitive processes of how we learn and process knowledge and information. In ascending order of complexity in the pyramid on the right, the revised taxonomy, we have remember, where we can recall the facts and basic concepts. Understand, this is where we can explain ideas and concepts. Excuse me. Apply, where they can use the learned information in new situations. Analyze, this is where they can draw connections among ideas, like compare and contrast. And then we have evaluate. This is where they can justify their decisions, defend, and critique others. And at the top of this pyramid, we now have create, where the student now should have the capability to produce new or original work. Excuse me, I had a tickle in my throat there. So many of you might not recognize this specific title, the Edgar Dale Cone of Learning, but most of you will definitely recognize this learning model. So this learning model incorporates several theories related to instructional design and learning processes. The Edgar Dale Cone of Learning, sometimes it's referred to as the Cone of Experience or Learning Pyramid. But what it does is it provides a visual representation of the various types of learning experiences and how that affects retention rates over time. It was proposed in the 1960s and aims to illustrate how different learning methods impact the retention rates. So just to summarize what we see here, we tend to retain 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, and 50% of what we see and hear. And then as we get into more of an active learning role, we retain approximately 70% of what we say and 90% of what we say and do. Now, this pyramid, I wouldn't say this is an absolute science, as retention rates will vary depending on the individual, the context of the material, and the quality of the learning experience, but it does emphasize the value of active learning over passive learning approaches, like lectures and reading. It also helps to illustrate that by combining various methods, we can achieve better learning outcomes for our students. Another published framework that describes the way we learn is called Kolb's Learning Styles. So as I review these, I'd like you to listen to the descriptions of each of these and reflect on which style best defines you. After we're done reviewing these, I'd like you to answer just a quick survey on which you think best describes you personally. The first learning style that I'd like to talk about is diverging. These people are able to look at things from different perspectives. They're sensitive. They prefer to watch rather than do. They tend to gather information and use imagination to solve problems. They're best at viewing concrete situations from several different viewpoints. Kolb called this style diverging because these people tend to perform better in situations that require ideas generation, for example, brainstorming. People with diverging learning styles have broad cultural interests. They like to gather information. They're interested in people. They tend to be imaginative, emotional. They tend to be strong in the arts. People with the diverging style prefer to work in groups. They prefer to listen with an open mind, and they appreciate personal feedback. Does that describe you? The next learning style that I'd like to talk about is assimilating. So the assimilating learning preference involves concise, logical approach. They prefer ideas and concepts more than people. These people require good, clear explanations rather than a practical opportunity. They excel at understanding wide-ranging information and organizing that information in a clear, logical format. People with assimilating learning styles are less focused on people. They're more interested in the ideas and abstract concepts. People with this learning style are more attracted to logically sound theories than approaches based on practical value. And this learning style is important for effectiveness in information and science careers. So in formal learning situations, people with this style prefer the readings, lectures, exploring analytical models, and having time to think things through. The next learning style I'd like to talk about is converging. So these are our problem solvers. People with a converging learning style can solve problems. They'll use learning to find solutions to practical issues. They prefer technical tasks and are less concerned with people and interpersonal aspects. So they're best at finding practical uses for ideas and theories. They can solve problems, make decisions by finding solutions to questions and problems. People with a converging learning style are more attracted to technical tasks and problems rather than social or interpersonal issues. And a converging learning style enables specialist and technology abilities. People with a converging learning style like to experiment with new ideas, to simulate, and to work with practical application. These are our problem solvers. And the last learning style that I'd like to talk about is accommodating. So the accommodating learning style is hands-on. So they rely on intuition rather than logic. These people use other people's analysis and prefer to take a practical, experiential approach. They're attracted to new challenges and experiences, to carrying out plans. They commonly act on gut instinct rather than logical analysis. People with accommodating learning styles tend to rely on the information from others and then carry out their own analysis. This learning style is the most prevalent learning style within the general population. Whether that's true or not in the EMS realm, we'll find out when we do our survey here in a minute. Kolb also believed that we cannot perform thinking and feeling simultaneously. So he created what's called the experiential learning cycle. The experiential learning cycle indicates that our learning style is actually a byproduct of those two decisions, thinking and feeling. So the learning cycle proves to emphasize the importance of actively engaging with experience to enhance learning and understanding. So we'll talk about these 4 stages here. We'll start with concrete experience in the upper right-hand corner. So the learning process begins with a concrete experience, which involves actively experiencing something or engaging in a real life situation. This could be anything from a practical activity, a specific event, hands-on learning, maybe, something in the classroom scenario section. Then we move on to reflective observation. So after the concrete experience, the learner reflects on what happened and observes the experience from different angles. They'll consider the outcomes, emotions, and factors that influenced the experience. So this would be more of a debriefing after a scenario. Then we have abstract conceptualization. In this stage, the learner tries to conceptualize the experience and form abstract ideas and generalizations based on the reflections. They seek to understand patterns, theories, and principles that explain the experience. And then we have active experimentation. So the final stage involves putting the newly formed concepts and theories into practice. Learners actively experiment with their ideas, theories, and solutions to see how they work in different situations. Then the process repeats. So as the concrete experience becomes the basis, so the new concrete experience becomes the basis for further reflection, conceptualization, and experimentation. The cyclic nature of the model emphasizes that learning is an ongoing and iterative process. So as we reflect on the learning styles, we can see that diverging includes concrete experience and reflective observation, or they prefer to feel and watch. So recall that the diverging learning style, they like people, brainstorming, they like working in groups, they're good in the arts. Assimilating Assimilating learning style includes reflective observation and conceptualization. So they prefer to think and watch. Recall that they like reading, they like information, they excel in the sciences. And then the converging learning style includes conceptualization and active experimentation. So the converging learning styles prefer to think and do. Those would be the problem solvers that we had mentioned. And then the accommodating learning styles include active experimentation and concrete experience. So they prefer to feel and do. So they take the information that they learn from others and they prefer to experiment and carry out their own analysis. So now that we've described the learning styles and the learning cycle of how those fit in there, how would you best describe yourself of these 4 learning styles? So Rio's going to go ahead and put that poll out there. If you could go ahead and answer that and submit it. And Rio, will those polls automatically pull up or?
Yeah, I will share the results in one
Okay,
second here.
no problem. I just wasn't sure. All right, so this is very interesting. Let me see if I can slide the poll over to the screen here. So many of us here, over 52%, consider ourselves converging, where we think and do, which is interesting to see our EMS results there. Thank you, everyone, for taking that survey. I mentioned earlier about learning theories in the introduction, and although there are several, the one I'd like to speak on is called Constructivism, which has had a significant impact on educational practice. So Constructivism is a learning theory and philosophy that emphasizes the active role of learners in constructing their understanding of the world. So it suggests that individuals build knowledge and meaning based on their own experiences, prior knowledge, and interactions with the environment. Rather than being passive recipients of information, learners are seen as active participants in the learning process, is one description of it. There's several different types of constructivism, social constructivism, cognitive constructivism, and radical constructivism, but all have a similar foundation and approach of active learning in the classroom, where the student takes an active role in their learning. Constructivism promotes, excuse me, hands-on experiential learning, where learners are encouraged to engage actively with the subject matter. This could involve problem solving, exploration, collaboration. Learners' existing knowledge and beliefs are considered foundational for new learning. So new information is integrated and connected with their prior knowledge, allowing for deeper understanding. Social interaction is believed to play a significant role in learning. So the collaborative activities, discussions, sharing perspective with others, this can enhance understanding and promote critical thinking. And this might be a new term, zone of proximal development. This is a concept that was introduced by psychologist Lev Vygotsky. The zone of proximal development refers to a range of tasks that the learner can perform with the help of a more knowledgeable individual, like an instructor or preceptor. So it recognizes the importance of providing the appropriate amount of support to the learners as they tackle new or challenging tasks. And according to constructivism, learning is not simply the transfer of information from teacher to student. So it's an active process where learners construct mental models, hypotheses, and interpret things based on their own experiences or interactions. The educators, us, we can help the learner by scaffolding, if this is a term you may have heard in the past. So scaffolding is the process of providing support and guidance to the learners while they're in that zone of proximal development. So we assist them as needed, and we gradually reduce that support as they become more capable and confident. Excuse me. Constructivism promotes discovering learning. This is where learners actively explore and investigate real-world problems and scenarios to uncover information and solutions. This process allows for deeper understanding. Excuse me, I got a tickle again. I do apologize. So by introducing the discovery learning, that also allows for deeper understanding and helps with long-term retention of the knowledge. Reflection is critical to the constructivist theory. The reflection encourages learners to reflect on the experience, thoughts, understanding. It helps them become aware of their thought processes, helps them identify gaps in their knowledge, and make connections to their existing knowledge. Constructivism also emphasizes the importance of learning within meaningful contexts that are relevant and applicable to the learner's life. So we all know with adult learning, something that we can apply to real life situation and problems helps us retain that information long term. Constructivism also promotes learner autonomy. It allows individuals to take ownership of their learning journey, set learning goals, regulate the learning process according to their needs and interests. And constructivism also acknowledges that different individuals may interpret information differently based on their unique experiences and perspectives. So this diversity of viewpoints is considered valuable for promoting critical thinking, fostering rich understanding of complex topics. if in summary, constructivism encourages educators to move away from your traditional lecture-based teaching and adopt more student-centered, inquiry-based approaches. So it highlights the importance of fostering a supportive learning environment, encouraging exploration, questioning, active engagement, and all to enhance the students' abilities to think critically and apply that knowledge effectively. So who are our students? What are their learning preferences? So learner preferences vary based on generational differences because each generation has unique characteristics, experiences, and expectations. Here are some general trends in learner preferences by generation of the ones we might see in the classroom anyway. So we have our baby boomers born between 1946, 1964-ish. They tend to prefer traditional learning methods like lectures, textbooks, face-to-face interaction. They tend to appreciate structured learning environments. They might prefer instructor-led training. They value the expertise of the teacher. And then for Generation X, typically born between 1965 and 1980, they prefer a mix of traditional and technology-enhanced learning methods. They appreciate flexibility in learning schedules, self-paced options. They might prefer more informal learning environments and value work-life balance. And then we have millennials or Gen Y, born between 1981 and 1996. They embrace technology. They prefer digital learning methods, online courses, e-learning platforms, things like that. They tend to value collaborative learning experiences. They enjoy working in groups. They do seek more instant feedback and recognition for their achievements. And then for Generation Z or Zoomers, born between 1997 and 2012, these are our true digital natives. They prefer learning through interactive, multimedia-rich content. They do appreciate bite-sized, easily digestible information, micro-learning formats. They tend to be socially conscious and value learning experiences that align with their beliefs and values. All that said, as educators and trainers, it's essential to consider the diverse needs and preferences of our learners, regardless of their generational cohort, to create effective and inclusive learning experiences. So flexibility and adaptability in our instructional methods are key to catering to our diverse learning preferences of all of our students. So these are generalizations, but they certainly could overlap with one another. So how does all the framework and theory into understanding our student fit into the flipped classroom? So the flipped classroom is an instructional approach that reverses the traditional roles of teaching and learning. In our typical educational setting, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to switch that slide. There we go. So in our typical setting, the students will listen to lectures and receive direct instruction from teachers during the class time, and then work on assignments at home. In the flipped classroom, we flip this model. So we have our pre-class learning, where students are provided with their learning materials, maybe pre-recorded video lectures, reading materials, online tutorials, things like that. They study before coming to class. This allows a student to get familiar with the concepts and gain a basic understanding of the topic independently. And then they do the in-class activities. So during the actual class time, the students engage in active learning activities. Instead of passively listening to lectures, they'll participate in discussions, scenarios, hands-on projects, group activities, any other collaborative activity that will reinforce the concepts they learned during the pre-class phase. Public safety group also included after-class activities that promote student accountability, which encourages deeper learning for the students. The main idea behind the flipped classroom model is to make the most of your face-to-face time for interactive and personalized learning experiences for the student. The students can use that time to ask questions, seek clarification on anything they found challenging during their pre-class study, and teachers can provide more individualized attention and support to address their specific needs. So let's talk about the roles in the flipped classroom. So we have our teachers. The teachers are our content creators. They're the ones that are going to develop the high quality pre-class learning materials like our video lectures, reading assignments, online resources, just interactive content. And then during class time, teachers are going to facilitate the active learning activities. They are going to guide the discussions and answer questions, provide personalized assistance to students that might need it. And then teachers need to assess the student understanding. So this would be through the formative assessments, providing feedback, and help the students improve their learning. And then we have the role of the students. Students take responsibility for their learning by engaging with the pre-class materials, watching the video lectures, reading the assignments, completing any homework. And then during class time, the students will actively participate in the discussions, the collaborative projects, problem-solving activities, or other interactive tasks. And this is the time the students should be seeking clarification from the teachers and from their peers on anything that they had difficulty with. There is also the role of technology. Technology platforms and tools are used to deliver the pre-class content. So this could be learning management systems, video hosting platforms, online resources. And technology can also facilitate the collaborative activities in the classroom, virtual interactions or group discussions. Then we have our administrators. Administrators can provide support and resources to the teachers in implementing the flipped classroom and providing opportunities for professional development to help the educator enhance their strategies in the use of technology within the classroom. And then we have our peers and classmates. The peers collaborate and work together during the in-class activities, and this helps foster a sense of community and collective learning. So each stakeholder's active involvement has a role in the success of the flipped classroom approach. Sorry about that. And all of them can help lead improve student outcomes and deeper understanding of the subject matter. So each of these roles are important. Just a recall of the Edgar-Dale Cone of Learning. By transitioning the classroom from a passive learning environment to an active learning environment down there at the bottom of this pyramid, we can dramatically increase student retention of the material. As mentioned in the intro, there are several advantages to the active learning environment. Students are actively engaged during class, which promotes better understanding and retention. Teachers can provide tailored support to students based on individual learning needs. Students can learn at their own pace during the pre-class phase. This helps to accommodate different learning styles and preferences. Teachers will have more time to interact with students on a one-on-one basis in strengthening their relationships. The in-class activities often focus on problem solving and those higher order thinking skills rather than rote memorization. Active learning Also encourages autonomy, self-regulation, empowering students to take a more active role in the learning process. And it encourages communication and collaboration. However, I think one of the most important benefits to incorporating an active learning environment may be the lifelong learning mindset of the student. So by nurturing critical thinking, self-directed learning, passion for inquiry, this model provides a strong foundation for lifelong learning. It equips the student with the skills and mindset necessary to seek knowledge, adapt to new challenges, and I keep flipping my slides, sorry guys, and help them to pursue personal and professional growth throughout the remainder of their lives. While the flipped classroom does have a lot of benefits, it also comes with some potential disadvantages that we should talk about, starting with access to technology. So the success of the flipped classroom heavily relies on students having access to the necessary technology, like computers, internet, and devices to watch those materials. Preparation and time intensive. So flipping the classroom requires significant preparation from our educators. So creating high quality pre-class materials, selecting appropriate resources, planning engaging activities, this can be time consuming, and it can be a challenge to maintain that level of preparation consistently. Some students might struggle with self-discipline, required to complete those pre-class activities independently. So without proper motivation and accountability, some students might not engage with the material and therefore they would have a lack of readiness during the in-class discussions and activities. In a flipped classroom, students are responsible for learning new content outside of class, which may disadvantage some students who require more direct instruction, or they might need more additional support from their instructor. Students who learn at different paces might find it challenging to keep up, or they might feel left behind. Technical difficulties, internet connectivity problems, device malfunctions, these can disrupt the learning process, especially if your students encounter these while they're trying to do the pre-class materials. With less time dedicated to direct instructions, students might have fewer opportunities for immediate feedback and individualized attention. This lack of direct interaction could be a disadvantage for some students, particularly for those who might require more guidance. The effectiveness of the flipped classroom relies heavily on the quality of those pre-class materials. So if the materials are poorly designed or they lack clarity, students might not grasp the concepts and they could lead to confusion during class activities. And we're all probably familiar with this over time. Implementing a flipped classroom can face resistance from students, administrators, who are accustomed to the more traditional teaching methods. So it may take some time for stakeholders to adapt to the new approach and fully embrace the benefits. Grading and assessment can be a challenge. The educator needs to find suitable ways to evaluate both the pre-class and in-class learning effectively. And while the flipped classroom can work well for certain subjects and topics, it might not be suitable for all topics. Some subjects might require more hands-on instruction or specialty resources that could be challenging using this flipped model. Despite some of the disadvantages, the flipped classroom can be successful with the proper planning, ongoing support, and adaptation to the specific needs of the student and the subject. So what can you, as the educator, do to incorporate student-centered learning into your classroom? So we can create a welcoming environment, foster positive, inclusive classroom atmosphere where students feel comfortable expressing their thoughts and feelings, encourage open communication and respect for diversity. Collaborate with the students to set learning goals and objectives for the course or specific topics. This gives students a sense of ownership and motivation to achieve those learning targets. Design lessons and activities that encourage students to ask questions, investigate topics, and discover answers on their own. Encourage curiosity and critical thinking by posing thought-provoking questions. Provide students with choices in assignments, projects, or topics they want to explore. Allow flexibility in how they demonstrate understanding. This could be through presentations, or maybe they prefer written work, or maybe multimedia projects. Act as a facilitator rather than a lecturer. So engage the students in meaningful discussions, debates, group activities, anything that will encourage them to actively participate and learn from each other. Incorporate collaborative projects, team projects, peer-to-peer learning, anything that will promote the exchange of ideas between and among the students. Integrate technology into the classroom. So any tools that will help facilitate interactive learning, online discussion, interactive simulations, multimedia resources would be good for that. Offer regular feedback on student progress and performance. So encourage self-assessment and reflection. So students take that more active role in monitoring their own learning journey. And flip the classroom. Consider implementing this model where students review pre-recorded lectures or materials outside of class and use that in class time for the more interactive activities, discussions, and problem solving. Additionally, promote self-directed learning. You can guide the students on how to take responsibility for their learning. Encourage them to seek additional resources, set goals, explore topics of interest beyond the curriculum. Excuse me. Connect the classroom to real life situations and practical application. Show the students how the concepts they are learning can be relevant and beneficial in daily lives. Provide opportunities for students to take leadership roles in class projects. Empowering students as leaders really enhances their confidence and their sense of responsibility. And recognize and appreciate that each student has unique strengths and talents. Acknowledge and value different learning styles and different preferences. And regularly reflect on the effectiveness of student-centered strategies. So we want to evaluate and then adjust based on that feedback. By incorporating these strategies, instructors can create an engaging and empowering learning environment. Students become active participants in their education. This leads to deeper understanding and much better retention of the knowledge. So some resources for you. While I'm not specifically promoting any products or services, there is an abundance of resources available to help instructors understand these theories and concepts and integrate active learning into the EMS classroom. A couple that I found that might be helpful, the Professor's Guide to Using Bloom's Taxonomy. This is a free PDF download from Top Hat. It has all of the Bloom's Taxonomy and how to integrate that and use it within the classroom. Public Safety Group has a free demo for EMT flipped classroom and paramedic flipped classroom right on their website. There's several resources to help you, with pre-recorded educational content. So screencast, Vimeo, YouTube. You can find interactive software that can be used in the classroom. We're probably pretty familiar with Kahoot. That's a fun one. Platinum's own EMS testing has an interactive group testing option. There's a free app from Microsoft called Flip. And I quote, their description says, where educators can create safe online groups for students to express their ideas asynchronously in short video, text, and audio messages. So they can work interactively on their own time. Nearpod provides interactive learning for college in-person and hybrid courses. But your biggest resource is definitely going to be other programs. So if you've done something that was really successful in your classroom, certainly share that with network of like programs and help them to make their classroom more interactive. So just to summarize everything that we learned here today, you can use the researched and published frameworks, theories, resources to better understand how our students learn, and then use those resources to influence how you teach and increase that student retention and lifelong learning practice. We have an abundance of resources available to us to help us overcome some of those challenges of the active classroom, especially networking of our like programs. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll go ahead and open it for any questions that you may have, or any ideas that you'd like to share through the chat with the other programs that are here. Thank you. Thank you all. Yes, I can send out the resources that I listed to the participants.
All right, I don't see any other questions here. Sherry, was there anything else that you would like to add?
Someone had asked if I could send out those resources, so I'll go ahead and provide those to you if you want to send them to the participants.
Yeah, absolutely. I can include those in tomorrow's follow-up email.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, everybody. So Sherry, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's just wonderful when we get to have you for a webinar. You have such great resources. So I will definitely make sure I get that shared with our participants today. Everybody else, I've sent a link in the chat for the CEU. But if you miss that, that's not a problem at all because that will be in tomorrow's follow-up email as well. All right, so I hope everybody has a great rest of the day and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Rio.
Thank you, Sherry. Bye.